Welcome to BurbNBougie News Recap. We are talking childcare. We're talking about the childless cities in America, and we're talking a little bit about what is going on in South Korea as far as more women going into the workforce. Please go ahead, give me a watch, and let me know which story stood out to you the most. We've been talking about the childcare costs. The COVID subsidies helped parents during the pandemic up until here recently when the COVID funding ended and Congress couldn't get it together to help parents. What is about to happen is the economy is going to continue to decline. Parents are going to continue to be crunched for money. Women will continue to opt out of having more babies because there is a dearth of childcare options and the expenses are too high. Anyways, let's get into this article. As childcare costs soar, more parents may have to exit the workforce. And when they say more parents, what they mean is more mothers will have to exit the workforce. The cost of childcare has risen so high in recent years that some parents, read women, can't afford to work. As of September, the average household spent more than $700 a month on childcare, up 32% from 2019, according to a recent report from the Bank of America Institute. The sharply higher costs are driving some parents to leave the workforce in order to look after their kids. So, just like I said, the federal funding for childcare costs is running out. States got $24 billion in stimulus money. And so this is going to put child care providers in a crunch, and they are just going to pass those costs off to the parents or they will shutter. 70,000 programs are at risk. 3.2 million kids could lose care. 10.6 billion with a B, 10.6 billion in lost economic activity because parents can't go to work if they have to watch their own kid. At the same time, many families laying out for childcare are having to tap their savings while down on spending, potentially weighing on economic growth. And that's if you do have actual savings. A lot of people are one blown tire away from being broke. While our data only capture payrolls deposited into Bank of America accounts and might not paint the full picture, we think the spending decline still points to the possibility of some working parents leaving the workforce as childcare prices rise rapidly. Childcare costs refer to the out-of-pocket expenses parents pay for their child to attend daycare or to hire a babysitter or nanny. The costs typically fall or disappear once a child enters preschool or kindergarten around ages 3 to 5. The U.S. economy loses an estimated $122 billion a year when parents leave work or reduce their hours in order to stay home with young children. Inflation has driven up childcare costs, while a loss in federal funding last month is also taking a toll. The 2021 American Rescue Plan directed nearly $40 billion to childcare centers nationwide to help stabilize their business during the pandemic while keeping prices lower for parents. But those funds expired on September 30th. As a result, the cost of childcare services are set to rise even higher, experts say, leading the country towards what they call a childcare cliff. Meanwhile, the roughly 2/3 of families who need childcare already dedicate more than 20% of their annual household income toward paying for it. With childcare costs set to rise substantially with government funding disappearing, a lot of people are having to look and say, can we afford this higher cost of childcare? Childcare centers are wondering if they can get in enough revenue to keep their doors open when they're losing access to federal funds. Democratic lawmakers in Washington are hoping to restore some of the lost ARPA funds under new legislation introduced last month called Childcare Stabilization Act. The measure would allocate $16 billion in mandatory funding to childcare centers each year for the next 5 years, among other things. And you would think that the pro-life crowd, the Republicans who want more births, would swoop in and want to work with Democrats to make this happen. But they don't want actual solutions. They want to keep people poor. Because I don't see any solutions outside of no reproductive care and run the doctors out. I don't see them doing anything tangible to actually help parents. Democrats behind the bill point to a June study from the Century Foundation, a progressive public policy group that estimated that households could lose $9 billion every year in earnings because they would have to leave work or reduce their hours in order to look after their children. Still, the bill faces a tough road in Congress with Republicans opposing the legislation. I, you know, and I'm about to do a post about Fox News because they consistently talk about the birth rate decline, but I don't see the Republicans or the mouthpiece or the media arm of the Republicans talking about how can we help parents with this child care crisis. You guys go ahead, jump in the comments and let me know what you think about this. Like, comment, share. I am always tickled when Fox News talks about the birth rate decline and childlessness and all that good stuff. So this is from Fox News. And when I say news, I mean that very loosely. I mean it very loosely. I do not believe that they inform anything. But let's get into this article. America's major cities are increasingly childless due to skyrocketing costs of living. Huh. They said something that makes sense. America's major cities are increasingly childless, an ongoing trend that was only exacerbated by the emergence of the remote work during COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. In addition, spiking crime rates, increased cost of living, and rising housing prices have pushed families out of the U.S. metro areas, according to Manhattan Institute fellow Robert BurbNBougie, who conducted a report that measured the family friendliness of America's cities based on the data of 200 metro areas. BurbNBougie's research looked at which metro areas have the most children, where families with children choose to move, and how metro areas fared based on measures of well-being such as educational achievement, social mobility, social capital, and child poverty. His research concluded that urban living can be made more appealing to families through increased educational choice and decreased cost of living. Okay, that makes sense so far. A pandemic, a crime wave, and a growing ability of knowledge workers to do their jobs without living in urban centers have only continued the decline of children's presence in cities, especially dense inner cores. Okay, so we're still making. America's major cities are increasingly childless, an ongoing trend that was only exacerbated by the emergence of the data tool, which allows readers to see how each of the 35 variables he measured correlate with all the others, found that cost of living emerged as the overwhelming reason why certain metro areas attract more family migration. His findings also show an abundance of children in the middle of the country, with noticeable stretches of child-starved regions on the coast. As people become richer, families especially want more space. So they tend to go places where they can get more space and tend to leave more and more dense inner city areas. Another dynamic that's come out since the pandemic has been that the rise of remote work, essentially if you have the ability to work from anywhere, those forces that were pushing people into cities kind of weakened a bit. I am surprised that they are actually spitting some data. It's crazy. A lot of people move to cities because that's where the jobs are. Cities have these really huge economic centers where this economic activity takes place. And if you can take part in that remotely without living there, that gives you other options. I think that really accelerated the trend towards having fewer or fewer kids in dense cities. BurbNBougie explained that if someone enjoys living in a big city, values their single life, and feels like they have to leave the city because it's either too expensive or because the environment is not suitable for kids, it forces people to make a difficult decision. My own sort of life journey took me from the suburbs into some really dense areas, he explained. I lived in New York City for a while, and then soon as we decided to have kids here, we were out of there. I think having cities that are inhospitable to family life, having cities that are really expensive when they don't need to be anywhere near that expensive because of the zoning laws, I think that forces a lot of people to make really difficult decisions over where they live and whether they can have kids while they're there. He also highlighted education, specifically school choice, as an important aspect of life that allows people to live where they want while also sending their kids to school somewhere they find acceptable. If family-sized housing is expensive in big cities, so is private school. Those wanting good public schools must pay for those too, because property values reflect the right to send kids to schools that property is zoned to. School closures during the pandemic increased many parents' sense of frustration and powerlessness over the workings of the schools to which they have been assigned. BurbNBougie said one consistent through line he found in his research based on the data of different variables was the high cost of living, which served as a huge driver of childless cities. He admitted that urban areas are likely always going to have a higher cost of living when compared to rural areas, but he doesn't believe the cost of living should be as high as it currently is. They have these district zoning laws and a lot of resistance to changing them to allow more people to live there. I think if you have to bring down the cost of living in cities, you can bring more families in there because they'll actually be able to afford to live there. Another factor is the spiking crime across the metro areas, especially since 2020, which has had a big impact on people's decision to move out of cities. If you live in a suburb, you can live somewhere that's safe and you can drive your car to other places that are safe. Whereas if you're living in a dense urban environment, any kind of crime that happens is just far more present to you because it's harder to avoid places where crime is happening. So controlling disorder is important. You know what? Everything that this person has said, BurbNBougie, has been on point. I have no complaints. I have no dissension. You guys go ahead and let me know what you think about this one. Like, comment, share. I know that my news app is completely confused about who I am. I'm steadily getting Asian news. This article is from the Korea Herald. It's talking about the low birth rate and its implications. So, low birth rate drives rise in number of working women in 30s. Let's get into this article. The South Korean 4B movement, which means no marriage, no sex, no dating, no babies, is really changing things and has changed things in South Korea very quickly because their birth rate has fallen off of a cliff. And what that means is more women have the time and energy and opportunity to pursue their careers. And you're seeing this in the data that women opting out is causing real life situations that the government is flailing and failing to fix. Let's get into this article a little bit more. The recent trend of an increase in proportion of working women in their 30s was primarily due to a reduction in the number of women with children, according to a report released Monday by the Korea Development Institute, a South Korea state-run think tank. Kim Ji-yoon, a researcher at the KDI, noted that although the drop in the number of women in their 30s that have children may seem like a positive factor in the short term because it boosts the number of women working in their 30s, it will likely have negative consequences in the long run. Ultimately, it could become a factor that causes economic and social problems as it will lead to a decrease in population and labor supply. So women's bodies and wombs continue to be to have a dollar sign placed on them. And instead of listening to women and fixing what is going wrong in the country, they just keep on wringing their hands and not fixing anything. The KDI report released Monday found that the increase in economic participation rate of women in their early 30s was driven by two main factors: a decrease in the number of women with children, 60%, and an increase in the number of working women with children, 40%. Kim noted that from 2024 to 2028, due to the fact that Korea is an aging society, the number of employed workers is expected to drop by 30 to 40,000 each year. For the time being, the recent increase in working women in their 30s is expected to offset the impact of an aging population by adding approximately 40,000 employed workers each year. Nevertheless, there are still concerns of long-term issues such as slowing economic growth, pensions, and government fiscal deterioration. So continuing to put a number on the wombs, but I'm still not hearing how they're going to compensate the women for these the labor force. And I'm not seeing where they're talking about changing society. The analysis was released following Statistic Korea's data that came out on October 18th. According to data from the Korean Statistical Information Service, the employment rate for those in their 30s in September was 79.6%, surpassing those in the 40s of 78.8% by 0.8 percentage points. This data is significant because it is the first time since the compilation of such statistics began in 1999 that the employment rate for those in their 30s has exceeded those in their 40s. The KOSIS data also showed that while the employment rate for women in their 30s has significantly increased, the employment rate for women in their 40s has remained at the same level as previous years. Also, the economic participation rate for women in their 30s recorded its highest levels in September at 70.5%. Since the compilation of statistics began. Over the last 24 years, it has increased by 15.2 percentage points. In contrast, the economic participation rate for women in their 40s stands at 67.7%, with little difference compared to June of 1999. The economic participation rate represents the ratio of economically active population, which includes both employed and unemployed individuals who are seeking jobs to the total population. According to Kim's report, it shows that men exhibit a reverse U-shaped pattern in their economic participation rate, increasing with age and then declining as they approach retirement age. In comparison, women tend to have an M-shaped pattern, decreasing their economic participation rate when they take career breaks for childbirth and childcare, and then re-entering the labor market once their children have grown up to some extent. In women's M-shaped pattern, the low point of economic participation rate curve for women in their 30s is moving from the early 30s to the late 30s. As a solution to these problems, Kim suggested boosting the economic participation rate of young Koreans by creating high-quality jobs, including promoting economic independence and early family formation. Okay, so have more kids younger. That's what they're going to do. That is not going to change women's minds. Kim cited the relatively low economic participation rate of young Koreans compared to other major developed countries as evidence to support her argument. In 2022, the economic participation rate of young people in Korea was 46.9% for those aged 20 to 24 and 74.3% for those aged 25 to 29, which is lower than that of the US, and Japan. America and Japan stand at 71 and 82%. In addition to creating high-quality jobs, Kim also asked for policies to support better work-life balance for childbirth and childcare, such as reduced working hours and flexible work arrangements. They could have led with that. They could have put that way in the beginning. They put that at the end. Creating a family-friendly work environment overall is also necessary. This last piece of the article really needed to be at the very beginning, because women are opting out for a reason. Women are opting out because of the misogyny and the anti-feminist sentiments in South Korea. And that is the reason for the formation of the 4B movement. And that is the reason why women are just saying, I'll just go to work, I'll do it myself. These people just are obtuse and they are not listening to women overall. And they're going to continue to see more women just go to work and opt out. Y'all go ahead, jump in the comments and let me know what you think. Like, comment, share.